I feel like I already have so many tips in other videos talking about grain direction, recognizing it, handling it, all those things, but if I don't have enough, here's another one. This leaf is obviously irregular. It's got some fairly large chips, so you can see I carved out the bulk of each of these sections first, which is something I do frequently and I've talked about before, to just relieve the pressure, so I'm not having to put as much force to remove, and I'm not ripping out the grain and stuff like that, making for better, cleaner results at the end. But the other aspect, even perhaps in light of that, with how free this section of the wood is now, for looking at these tips of the leaves here, because the grain is running in this direction, as I'm carving around this way, which is a with the grain cut, as I get to this section here, I'm carving against the grain and then trying to transition the knife this way, and as the knife kind of twists and follows this shape, it puts a pressure outward on the wood, and it's going to cause it to want to split, especially a tight curve like this or this one. This one's not quite as tight. It might not be as much of a problem because it kind of goes along with the grain for the most part, but these two really bend back into the grain a lot. So one thing that I have found very useful for that is not trying to do it in one cut, and not even necessarily doing it in two, but I try to line up the blade with where the tangential part of the line is that's running exactly with the grain. Put the blade up here and then just remove that little bit, and I didn't quite get the pattern line, so I'll take off another little slice, and now you can see just the part of the pattern line is cut that runs with the grain. And so do that for this one as well. And what that allows me to do now is I don't need to make that transition, going from against the grain to with the grain, and it's not going to push that piece of wood out. So now I put the knife in that section that I cut, and now I can just continue on, and then I have another smaller one right here, so I'll do the same thing, just remove that little slice. And I also don't really want to continue this around and mess with that transition, so I'm going to do the opposite now and start here and come into that direction. And so you can see it makes a nice clean cut on both sides, and it does take some practice to get those cuts to line up well. This is a pretty small section, so it's a bit easier, but that way the knife is able to kind of do what it wants to with the wood, and you can see that right there lifting up the grain. So it didn't lift up too much, so I'm not concerned with the final result on that, but I do want to make sure to preserve it. So do that same first cut there, remove some of the scrap wood, and then follow this around. I didn't quite get to finish that cut, so clean that up here. And I'll do one more example with this section of the leaf coming up. So again, just take off a little slice. In this case, it's a particularly small slice, especially since I already, like I said, removed the inside sections of these chips. So depending on how your pattern lines up, it may or may not be a particularly small section like that. But it should be a pretty small, fairly small slice, because the whole point is you don't want to be putting a lot of pressure into the grain of the wood. So in situations like that, you want to be removing small amounts of wood at a time. So another grain direction tip to make sure you get the wood to respond the way that you want for clean cuts and